God bless everyone. Today I will share the testimony of Brian Lohr, a successful lawyer whose life took an unimaginable turn after a near-death experience. In a moment of triumph, Brian was pulled from his world of success and ambition into a horrifying vision of hell, a realm of endless darkness, blazing rivers of lava, and twisted creatures. There, he encountered none other than Billy Graham, the beloved preacher, but not as we remember him, instead, in torment. What could have led to this shocking fate? Now, I'm going to read Brian's letter just as it is, and together we will uncover his sin, the startling reason Billy Graham was there, and the transformative path back to redemption through Jesus Christ. I am Brian Lohr, a 48-year-old lawyer living in the bustling city of Austin, Texas. My life is one that many would envy, a thriving career in law filled with victories, a beautiful home, and a loving family. From the outside, everything appeared perfect. Each courtroom win and professional accolade seemed to solidify the image of a man at the peak of his success. But behind the polished surface of my life, there was a growing void, one that success and ambition could not fill. I was so consumed by the pursuit of more wins, more prestige, more wealth, that I rarely stopped to consider what I was losing in the process. As a child, faith was the foundation of my world. I still vividly recall sitting beside my father at Billy Graham's sermons, his powerful words resonating deep in my young heart. I admired Graham's unwavering dedication to God and the way he inspired millions, including my father. Those memories of my father's quiet prayers and the peace he found in faith stayed with me, shaping my early understanding of spirituality. But over the years, those seeds of faith were buried under the relentless grind of my career. My ambition silenced the voice of God, and the sermons that once brought me comfort faded into distant echoes. Now, as I reflect on those years, I see how far I had drifted from the faith of my childhood. My life became a cycle of work and ambition, with little time for my family or for nurturing my spirit. I lived for the applause of the courtroom and the accolades of my peers, blind to the cost. The values instilled in me as a child, the importance of family, humility, and walking in God's path, had been left behind. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was on a dangerous path, one that would soon lead me to a place I never thought I'd see. But what happened next would shatter everything I thought I knew about success, faith, and the ultimate truth of my existence. It was an evening of triumph. I had just wrapped up one of the most high-profile cases of my career, a criminal case in Manhattan that seemed destined to go down in legal history. The rush of victory filled the air as I sat in my office, savoring the moment, a glass of whiskey in hand. The world felt like it was mine to conquer. But as I leaned back, basking in the glow of my accomplishments, something unexpected happened. Without warning, a massive chandelier above my desk gave way. I barely had time to process the sound of its metal frame snapping before it came crashing down. In an instant, everything turned black. The darkness wasn't the kind that comes with sleep. It was deeper, more oppressive, as if it were swallowing me whole. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in a place that defied logic or imagination. Gone was my familiar office. In its place was a surreal, nightmarish landscape. Rivers of molten lava bubbled and hissed, cutting through cracked, jagged ground. The air was thick with the acrid stench of sulfur, so strong it burned my lungs with every breath. Shadows danced along the periphery of my vision, but they weren't natural. They moved with a malevolence, as if alive, as if watching me. My heart pounded as an overwhelming sense of dread gripped me. As I took my first hesitant steps, the world around me seemed to come alive with horrors. Twisted, grotesque creatures roamed the fiery expanse, their distorted forms a terrifying mockery of humanity. Screams and moans echoed from every direction, mingling with the crackling of the lava and the distant roars of unseen monstrosities. The sky above was obscured by swirling black clouds that never seemed to settle, flashing occasionally with lightning that illuminated the hellish scene. Every step I took felt like a fight to maintain my sanity. I didn't know where I was or why I was there, but I knew one thing for certain. I had left the world I knew far behind. And as I looked deeper into this terrifying abyss, I realized I wasn't alone. Something, or someone, was waiting for me. As I navigated the hellish landscape, my attention was drawn to a towering pulpit rising from the fiery depths. It seemed out of place, almost defiant in its construction, as though it were meant to inspire reverence. But as I drew closer, what I witnessed filled me with both shock and sorrow. Standing on the pulpit was a figure I immediately recognized: Billy Graham. The same Billy Graham whose sermons had once stirred my soul as a child, whose words had ignited faith in millions across the globe. But here, his voice, once powerful and commanding, was unrecognizable. The words tumbled out in a distorted, guttural mess, as if their meaning had been stripped away. Around him, demonic creatures laughed and jeered, their mocking echoing through the darkness. The sight of him, broken, defeated, and mocked, was more horrifying than anything I had yet seen. As I stood frozen, grappling with the impossibility of what I was seeing, a voice emerged from the shadows around me. Soft and echoing, it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You wonder why he is here, don't you?" it asked. I turned, searching for its source, but the speaker remained hidden. The voice explained that Graham, despite his devotion to spreading God's word, had fallen victim to a dangerous flaw: the pursuit of worldly approval. In seeking the applause of his audience, he diluted the truth of his message, softening God's word to appeal to the masses. His arrogance found its punishment here, the voice continued, a haunting mixture of sorrow and judgment. It was a lesson delivered not just about Graham, but about the weight of influence and the devastating consequences of compromise. As the Spirit's words sank in, a chilling realization washed over me. Billy Graham's downfall was not entirely foreign to me. It mirrored my own life in ways I could no longer ignore. I had spent years chasing recognition and success, bending over backward to win the favor of others, even at the expense of my own faith and family. The voice spoke of how Graham's compromises had rendered his words hollow, and I couldn't help but see the same hollow echoes in my own life. My pursuit of ambition, my neglect of what truly mattered, it was all leading me down a similar path. And as I stared at the defeated figure of Billy Graham, a question burned in my mind, one that I feared to answer. Was this where my own choices would lead me? But before I could dwell on it further, the voice spoke again, leading me toward a revelation that would shake me to my core. Hell was a place unlike anything I could have ever imagined, its every detail etched with vivid, horrifying clarity. Rivers of molten lava snaked through the desolate terrain, their glowing orange veins bubbling and hissing with a menacing life of their own. The air was thick with the acrid stench of sulfur, so strong it burned my lungs with each ragged breath. Above me, thunder roared like an angry beast, and the sky churned with endless black clouds, swirling as if stirred by unseen hands. Periodically, jagged streaks of lightning tore through the darkness, illuminating the twisted, fractured ground that trembled beneath my feet. Every step felt like walking on the edge of an abyss, threatening to pull me into the fiery depths below. The emotional weight of this place was crushing. The screams of unseen, tormented souls echoed from every direction, mingling with guttural cries and eerie, mocking laughter. It was a symphony of despair, a constant reminder that no hope could exist here. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision, but they were not merely tricks of the light. They felt alive, sentient, and malevolent. It was as though the very air conspired against me, pressing down on my chest and filling my heart with a dread I had never known. Every sound, every flicker of movement seemed designed to drive home one truth. This was a place of eternal suffering, where all hope had been abandoned. In the midst of this despair, the towering pulpit stood as a chilling monument, its presence both commanding and condemning. Its dark silhouette rose from the fiery landscape like a judge's gavel, ready to deliver a final damning verdict. It wasn't just a structure, it was a symbol, a representation of the weight of influence, of power misused and truths compromised. The laughter of the demonic creatures surrounding it was a cruel mockery of worldly achievements, a grim reminder that no amount of fame or recognition could shield one from the consequences of a corrupted soul. As I stood there, staring at the pulpit and the broken figure of Billy Graham upon it, I couldn't shake the feeling that this place, this hell, was not only a reflection of eternal punishment, but also a mirror. It showed me the futility of my own ambitions and the emptiness of the path I had chosen. Yet even in this dark place, something within me sensed there was more to discover, something deeper, something that could perhaps offer a glimmer of understanding or even redemption. And so, with fear and trembling, I pressed on. In the midst of the unrelenting darkness, a brilliant light erupted, piercing through the suffocating blackness like the dawn after an endless night. It wasn't just light, it was warmth, peace, and an overwhelming sense of mercy wrapped in justice. My heart, which had been pounding with fear moments earlier, seemed to still as the presence of Jesus Christ enveloped me. His figure radiated an indescribable purity, and yet, as his eyes met mine, I felt the full weight of my flaws laid bare. It was as if he could see every ambition, every selfish choice, every moment I had turned away from the path I knew was right. His gaze wasn't condemning, but it was piercing, a gentle but firm mirror held up to my soul. For the first time, I truly saw myself, and what I saw was far from the man I thought I had been. Jesus spoke, his voice resonating with a power that reached the deepest parts of my being. "Brian," he said, and the sound of my name carried both love and authority. "You have chased the applause of the world and turned your back on the things that truly matter. Your ambition blinded you to the needs of your family, your children, and even your own soul. You sought success in the eyes of men, but neglected the path I laid before you." Each word felt like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of despair, yet they also carried a sharp truth that cut through my illusions. He reminded me that the accolades, the victories, the wealth, all the things I had placed at the center of my life, held no value here. "What good is it to gain the whole world," he said, "but lose your soul?" In that moment, I understood that everything I had worked for was hollow, a castle of sand washed away by the tide. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the world I had left behind. The stark white walls of a hospital room greeted me, and the faces of my family hovered near, their eyes filled with tears of both fear and relief. I wanted to weep, not just for the pain I had caused them, but for the realization of how close I had come to losing everything. Their love surrounded me, unspoken, yet undeniable, and it was then that I made a promise, to God, to them, and to myself. I would no longer let ambition rule me. My family, my faith, and the path God intended for me would take precedence over everything else. I began to share my story, my testimony, hoping that my experience might serve as a warning to others. The message was clear. Success and wealth are fleeting, but faith, love, and connection are eternal. Yet, even as I spoke these truths, I felt the weight of responsibility growing within me, pulling me towards something greater. The journey wasn't over. There was more to understand, more to change, and more to reveal. What would come next would challenge everything I thought I knew, and it would demand more of me than I ever imagined. Hell was a place of unspeakable horror, its very essence designed to strip away hope and humanity. The rivers of molten lava weren't just molten rock. They felt alive, their fiery currents writhing and gurgling as if eager to consume. The air, thick with sulfur, burned my lungs with every shallow breath, a suffocating reminder of the inescapable torment surrounding me. Shadows moved with a sinister purpose, their forms vague yet menacing, creating an ever-present tension that kept my heart pounding. The screams of the tormented echoed endlessly, layering over the distant roar of thunder and the ominous crackle of flames. Then, in a moment that shattered the oppressive darkness, a light burst forth, so pure and brilliant that it seemed to banish the evil around me. Jesus stood in that radiant glow, his presence a striking contrast to the despair I had endured. His light wasn't just brightness, it was warmth, peace, and an overwhelming sense of mercy that pierced through every layer of my being. Yet his gaze revealed more than just love. It was as if he could see through the facade I had built, through every accomplishment, every ambition, to the hollow core of my soul. My achievements, the wealth, the admiration of my peers, all the things I had clung to, now felt meaningless under his scrutiny. His words were both gentle and firm, each syllable cutting through my defenses like a scalpel. "Brian," he said, his voice carrying the weight of eternity, "you chased the applause of men and turned away from what truly mattered. You abandoned the love of your family and the path I prepared for you, blinded by ambition." In that moment, I was overwhelmed by the enormity of my failures. Yet, there was no condemnation in his tone, only a call to transformation. His mercy reached into the depths of my despair and pulled me out, not as a punishment, but as an opportunity to begin again. When I woke in the hospital, surrounded by the faces of my family, I was no longer the same man. The ambition that had once fueled me now felt like a chain I was desperate to break. My heart was heavy with remorse, yet it was also filled with gratitude for the chance to make things right. I looked into the tear-streaked faces of my wife and children, and for the first time in years, I truly saw them, not as fixtures in my life, but as my purpose. The message was clear. Faith, family, and love are the cornerstones of a meaningful life, not success or wealth. But even as I embraced this truth, I knew my journey wasn't over. The path ahead would require more than just a shift in priorities. It would demand a complete transformation of my heart and soul. And as I stared into their hopeful eyes, I couldn't help but wonder, what would this new chapter bring, and how would I rise to meet it?